Levi here, the Outdoor Cowboy, and welcome back to the Outdoor Cowboy YouTube channel. And today we're going to be talking about how to stay warm when you're in the outdoors. Whether you're out surviving or you're camping with your family, I'm going to be sharing 12 of my favorite ways to keep you and your family warm when you're in the outdoors. From having a fire, to eating good food, to having good gear. And stick around to the end for my favorite one, the bonus one at the end. I'm going to share my favorite ways to stay warm when I'm in the outdoors. So let's jump into these 12 ways and into the video and saddle up for the ride. Staying warm is one of the most important things when it comes to survival. Whether you're out snow camping or you're camping with your family or you're out survival camping, building a shelter, no matter where you are or what you're doing, it's important that you stay warm. Staying warm really is staying alive, and that's super important. So today we're going to be talking about 12 of my favorite ways to stay warm when you're in the outdoors. These are tips and tricks that I use when I'm out survival camping or just in the outdoors to stay warm, and ones that you guys can apply when you're in the outdoors as well. So we're just going to be going through them quick, just going to be talking about them, how they work, and how you can apply them. Because you don't necessarily have to do all these at one time. If you're really out in the cold, it's going to be really cold, maybe below zero, you're snow camping, something like that, then it might be important to take more of these into account because you need to stay warmer. So making sure that you have enough to stay warm. But if you're going to be out camping and it's summer or it's fall like it is here, it may not be super important that you do a lot of these because it won't get super cold. But it's just important to know where you're going, knowing how cold it's going to be, just making sure that you're doing the things that you and your family need to stay warm. So I hope you learned some new ways that you can stay warm, and let's jump into it. All right, and our first way to stay warm when you're in the outdoors is to build a fire. And though it's simple, it really is one of the most important things when you're able to build one. Obviously there's some locations where you're not able to build one, or maybe situations where you're not able to. And that's totally fine, there's definitely ways around it, but if you're able to build a fire, it's one of the best things you can do to stay warm in the outdoors. A couple things that I think fires are great for keeping you warm when you're in the outdoors is once you get it started, it really can last as long as you want, as long as you have fuel for it. So just finding sticks, branches, anything like that, fallen trees, can be fuel for your fire. So once you get it going, you're not wasting your own resources or anything like that, and it's not stuff you have to carry with. As long as you can find fuel in the outdoors, you'll be able to keep a fire going, and it'll give you a lot of warmth. Another thing I love about it for providing warmth in the outdoors is when you're in the outdoors, when you're in nature, there really aren't a lot of sources of warmth. Most of the time we're putting layers on or having our sleeping bag, things like that, which is really to keep our warmth in. But having sources of warmth is super awesome. A fire is obviously a huge one, and our bodies is obviously a super important one. Our bodies create heat, and it's important to keep all that heat in with layers and stuff, which we'll be talking about later. But a fire is just an awesome source of heat, which obviously it doubles as a way to cook your food, purify your water, anything like that. Just super awesome. So that's our first way to stay warm in the outdoors, is to build a fire. Now let's move on to our next one. All right, and our next way to stay warm when you're in the outdoors is hand warmers. These things are just awesome, and I pretty much always have them with me. They're just a super light and small and easy source of heat. You can't really go wrong with them. And there's so many different options. Just here I have some examples. We have a body warmer, which is a little bit bigger. We have toe warmers, which are made to go inside your boots. We got hand warmers that are a little smaller. And there's a ton more options and sizes that you can use. They have even lap warmers that are huge, or they have adhesive body warmers, which are probably the ones I use most, that are about this size, but they're adhesive on one side so you can stick them on to you, which are super awesome. And these things are just great because they're super small and light, but they have so many applications. You can really use these anywhere. You can put them inside your clothes, in your boots, in your gloves, or in your sleeping bag, in your tent, anything like that, and they can be great for giving you heat. There's a lot of times where I'll put an adhesive one on my base layer near my chest to keep me warm, or I'll throw a couple of these into my sleeping bag, or I love to throw these in my wife's sleeping bag just because she sleeps a little warmer than I do. So you just toss a couple of these things in and they produce a lot of heat. And they're really just another great source of warmth along with our fire that can be super helpful. They're super small, and this one says it lasts up to 18 hours. I think that can definitely vary, but they all last a pretty long time for how long they'll give off heat. I've definitely put these in my sleeping bag when I've gone to sleep, and they've been plenty warm in the morning. So these are just awesome, super light. They're waterproof in their package. You just take them out and activate them whenever you need them. And they're just a great source of heat that will last a super long time. So get yourself some hand or body warmers. You can even find them at the dollar store, which is super awesome. That's usually where I get them just because it's super cheap, but they're just an awesome source of heat. And that's our second way to stay warm in the outdoors. Now let's move on to our next one. All right, and our next important thing for staying warm when you're in the outdoors is your sleeping bag. Having a sleeping bag that fits you correctly and is rated good enough for where you're going to be going is one of the most important things for when you're camping. If you have a sleeping bag, it's going to be what keeps you warm at night. So make sure to focus on it when you're in the outdoors, just making sure that you have a good sleeping bag that'll keep you warm at night, but you'll also be able to get some good sleep. Making sure that it fits you well is super important. If it's too big, it's going to be hard to warm up because there's going to be a lot of space and a lot of air to insulate. So making sure that it fits you, but it's not too small, because if it's too small, it won't keep you warm enough. And when it comes to the temperature ratings on sleeping bags, they're important to look at, but you want to make sure that your sleeping bag is rated for a lot lower than what you're going to be going to. If it's going to be 40 degrees outside or 60 degrees outside or 20 degrees outside, you're going to want your sleeping bag to be at different warmths. I usually like to think that I want my sleeping bag to be rated about 20 to 30 degrees colder than what it's going to be. So this one that I have right here is my 0 degree bag. So I wouldn't want to use this bag if it was going to get colder than 20 or 30 degrees, but this bag is probably way too warm if it's going to be 60 or 70 degrees. So that's important to think about. But that doesn't mean that you have to go buy a new sleeping bag for every occasion. Sleeping bags are awesome because you can double them up. So you can put a sleeping bag inside a sleeping bag and it will make it way warmer. Or you can buy quilts that you can fit inside of it. Or you can just wear lots of layers. You can put hand warmers in, a hot water bottle in your bag. Those are all things that can make a sleeping bag a little bit more versatile. Another great thing is that you can insulate your sleeping bag with a sleeping bag bivvy. If you've seen some of my survival videos, I have a sleeping bag bivvy that I made out of a tent rainfly. And it's super awesome. I love putting around my sleeping bag just for a little more insulation. Probably makes my sleeping bag maybe 10 or 15 degrees warmer. Keeps me waterproof. Just an awesome, super light and small way that I can make my sleeping bag work in more situations. So make sure to be aware of where you're going to be going and what the weather's going to be like. Make sure you get yourself a good sleeping bag and make sure it'll keep you warm when you're in the outdoors. So our next important thing is your sleeping bag. Now let's move on to the next one. All right, and our next important thing for staying warm when you're in the outdoors is making sure to stay dry. If you get wet, it makes staying warm 100 times harder. It's so much harder to be warm when you're wet because wind can make it feel colder, but it also just makes the insulation of your layers work less, so staying dry is super important. And we can't control the weather, so it might rain or snow or hail, or there might be situations where you have to cross a stream or a river to get to where you're going. Anything like that are all things that are important to take into account to make sure that you can stay dry when you're in the outdoors. And a couple things I think are super important for staying dry are having a good rain jacket or just a waterproof outer layer. I think this is one of the most important things that you can have when you're in the outdoors. Making sure that you have waterproof gear is super important because it'll keep your body dry. Because if you have wet clothes, wet gear, it's going to be less comfortable for you and make it harder for you to stay warm. And I did want to point out that especially boots and socks are important to keep dry. If there's snow or you have to walk through a stream or even there's dew on the ground, those are all things that can get your boots and socks wet. And it's always great to have waterproof boots, but that doesn't always work 100% of the time and your socks can get wet, which is just one of the grossest things ever. I hate having wet socks, so I pretty much always bring spares of socks, but there's also ways that you can dry them out. So it's important to dry them out either over the fire or with a hot water bottle, anything like that. And moving on from our gear, it's also important that our shelters stay waterproof if it's gonna rain or snow on us. So having things like tarps that you can put over you in your shelter to keep you dry, or as simple as a tent with a rain fly, all great options to keep you dry, because if you can stay dry, it's a lot easier to stay warm. So let's move on to our next tip. All right, now on to our next way to stay warm in the outdoors. We got the warm water bottle. And this one is awesome. It's super easy, but it works super well. It's kind of like a makeshift hand warmer that we talked about earlier. It can be used in similar applications. You can put it inside your clothes and it'll keep you warm. Or my favorite thing is to put it inside a sleeping bag. And I found that Nalgene's work best for this. They just hold the water really well. They won't melt like other plastic water bottles, and they just insulate and keep it warm super well. So I've had my pot on my stove for a little while, and our water is super warm. It's just right below boiling. It doesn't have to be boiling, and you don't want your water to be too hot because then the water bottle will burn you. So let's fill our water bottle up with our warm water, and then we'll talk about how we can use this. Just like that, we got our water bottle full, nice and steamy, and just super warm. So like I said, this is an awesome thing that it's super warm and will stay warm for a super long time. I can go like this and shove it in my jacket, or you can zip it up in a coat and it will keep you warm. Or one of my favorite things to do is take it and just toss it in my sleeping bag just like that. It'll start to warm my sleeping bag, and then when I jump in there, it'll stay warm. And warm water bottles like this can stay warm all night, which is awesome. They'll keep you super warm, and they can just make a cold night a lot better. So fill up some warm water in your Nalgene, throw it inside your sleeping bag or your clothes. This thing will keep you super warm. I think this is super great, especially for really cold camping or snow camping, because I've had my water bottles freeze overnight and it takes a long time to thaw them out in the morning. So Warming them up like this gives them a purpose at night. They'll keep you extra warm, and then you'll have some nice water ready to go in the morning. And the warm water is also awesome just because it can be used for other things as well, not just for keeping yourself warm. Some of my favorite things are you can dry out socks with this, so you can put socks over this. And a lot of people like to do that just to make it a little more cuddly when they're sleeping with it, is they'll throw a sock over it. Or if you get your water a little too hot, a sock can be a good barrier between you and the water bottle that can keep you warm. But this can also be great for drying out boots. So I've got my boot here, and if it got wet and cold, I get my water super hot and throw it in here, and then just toss my water bottle in my boot like that. Let it sit for a little while, and it does super great for drying out damp boots, making them a little warmer in the morning. So lots of uses for our warm water bottle. One of my favorite tips, so definitely try it next time you're out. And let's move on to our next way to stay warm when we're in the outdoors. All right, our next way to stay warm when you're in the outdoors is to use a heat reflector. And heat reflectors are to pair with a fire to make the fire a little more effective and not just letting its heat go all around, but to make sure it's more directed towards you or your shelter or your camp, whatever it may be. And reflectors can really be a lot of things. I have this log that I rolled over and set by our fire. Obviously I'm doing it in this nice fireplace, so it's a little bit harder to make heat reflectors, but this works great. It's helping to reflect the heat towards me. Or you can place a bunch of rocks and kind of stack them up around your fire on the opposite side of the fire to reflect the heat towards you. Any of those are great options to make your fire more effective. And it really is crazy how much warmer this can make the heat towards you. Obviously it's called a reflector, and it gets its name because it's good at its job. Whatever it may be, if it's a log or if you build your shelter around your fire, it can act as a reflector, or rocks. Anything like that, just do a great job at making sure the heat is more directed towards you, so you can use less wood to stay warm and make your fire last longer, just to keep you warm when you're in the outdoors. Obviously, if your reflector's made of wood like this log, or you build a shelter around your fire and it's made of trees or fallen wood, it's important to keep your fire a little bit away from the reflector. You obviously don't want your reflector or your shelter to catch on fire. That can be really bad, so it's important to keep its distance, but that's a good reason to use rocks, is because obviously those can't catch on fire. So just be smart, but be creative, because it can make your fires way more effective in keeping you warm and make it so you have to find and gather less wood, and your fire will last a lot longer but keep you a lot warmer. So our reflector is our next way to stay warm in the outdoors. Now let's move on to our next one. All right, now for our next important thing to think about, just to stay warm in the outdoors. We're back over here with our sleeping bag, but this time we're going to be talking about our sleeping pad, which is super important. A sleeping pad's main goal, other than comfort, is to keep you off the ground, because the ground is usually, I feel like, 20 to 40 degrees cooler than it is in the air, just because it's got moisture and really good insulation. Especially if it's really cold out, the ground can even just be frozen, and then you definitely want to be separate from the ground. So it's super important to think about. There's different kinds of sleeping pads. There's insulated ones, there's thicker ones. This is just kind of my basic backpacking one, just because it folds up super tight. But there's tons of different options when it comes to finding a sleeping pad. And you definitely want to make sure you find one that's big enough so you don't roll off of it, or there's not like parts of your body hanging off, because then those can get cold. Or you can also even stack sleeping pads if you have ones that aren't very good. You can put 2 or 3 on top of each other, and that will provide enough insulation to keep you off the ground and keep you warm. And this is important to think about whether you're inside of a tent and you're setting up a sleeping pad, or you're in the outdoors, you're on wood, or you're on the actual ground. It's really important that you have a good sleeping pad that'll keep you off the ground a little bit, so you don't feel the cold of the ground. So sleeping pad and sleeping bag are both super important things. Now let's move on to our next way to stay warm when you're in the outdoors. Our next thing to talk about when we're talking about staying warm when we're in the outdoors is eating lots of food that has good calories. And this one is actually super important. I think a lot of people are in the outdoors, if they're working hard or if they're cold, it makes them not want to eat food, but it's super important to remember to eat food. And it's even better if it has a lot of calories in it, because your body can burn those and your body will create heat, which is one of the most important things. Like we talked about, there's not a ton of sources of heat in the outdoors. We're mostly just trying to layer up to preserve our heat, but our body is our most important heat source, and we need to make sure that we have good food in us just to continue to exert ourselves and be able to have fun in the outdoors. And really eating any calories will be important for your body. Give your body food that it can burn to create energy and heat. But if you have warm meals, that's even better, because those can really warm you up. So I would definitely recommend that. Find a good warm meal that has a lot of calories. And these are just some of my favorite options. I love these freeze-dried meals. They have tons of different options, and they're super easy to make. They just take boiling water so they're warm. But they usually have around 1,000 calories, which is awesome. I think they usually say for 2 people, but I usually eat one by myself. But that's right, they're delicious, lots of calories, they'll keep you warm. Or there's even things like MREs. These things as well, super easy to make and super light. Tons of calories, lots of nutrients. And then find great snacks as well, like protein bars have a ton of nutrients in them. And then my favorite is trail mix. I eat tons of this stuff. I love taking it with me in the outdoors, and I love just eating it all the time. So find good food that you enjoy that has great calories, because it can make your trip a lot better, but it can be super important for keeping you warm when you're in the outdoors. So let's move on to our next way to stay warm when we're in the outdoors. All right, we've already talked about some of the gear and things that are important for us to wear and have that'll keep us warm. But obviously those things will vary depending on the environment that we're camping in. And we're gonna hit on proper layering a little bit later. But I just wanted to point out 3 things that are super important no matter where you're gonna be going. And that is gloves, socks, and hats. These things right here are some of the most important things to think about when you're going in the outdoors, just because these are the 3 places that most heat is lost. Obviously we normally have layers over our body, which is super important. And we usually have shoes on when we're in the outdoors, but our hands and our head are oftentimes exposed. And even in our shoes, our feet are still exposed to the cold, whether they're walking through water or snow or cold temperatures, or they're just not super insulated. So it's really important to think about these 3 things, because this is where most of your heat will be lost. These are the 3 most common places where frostbite happens, and the 3 things that if you insulate well will keep you super warm. First, socks. Super important to have good socks. We talked about keeping them dry, bringing extra layers. Your feet themselves don't like move a lot with inside your shoes or boots. So having good socks, I love wool socks. I think those are the best option just because they're super soft, they're super warm, but they also don't lose a lot of their heat if they get wet. So that's super important to think about. A hat is maybe kind of more of an obvious one, but it's still super important because it's super important to keep your head warm. Your ears and nose are places that are really important. So you can even wear a balaclava or a scarf over your nose with a hat, anything like that, that'll just keep your head warm. And it'll help a lot with wind chill or anything like that. So having a good hat's really important. And then the last thing with gloves, most of the time our hands are the things that's exposed most because we're using them, whether we're building a shelter, cooking, or doing anything like that. But that's often the times when they get the coldest and the most heat is released from our body. So having good warm gloves is super important, but also thinking about gloves that you can do work in is super important. Here's one of my thinner pairs of gloves. Is usually what I use for hunting because I like them because they're warm, but they're also super thin. And here are some of my more thicker gloves. They're a wool and leather mitten. These things are super warm, but obviously when I'm in them, my fingers don't really work. So this might not be the best for getting work done, but they have their uses. It's important to have gloves you can work in while you're working, but once you stop working, either having a pair that goes over or another warm pair like this that's maybe even waterproof if you're in the snow or the water. That'll just really keep your hands warm. So those are 3 areas that I really wanted to point out that are super important to think about when you're thinking about the gear that you're going to be wearing when you go into the outdoors. Your socks, your gloves, and your hat. Those 3 things, if you got them, will keep you way warmer. So let's move on to our next way to stay warm when we're in the outdoors. All right, for our next way to stay warm when you're in the outdoors, we're back over to our sleeping bag, but this one is going to be storing your clothes in your sleeping bag while you're sleeping. So I've got one of my pairs of gloves, a spare pair of socks, one of my jackets, and these aren't things I'm going to be sleeping in, but I still don't want them to just be left out. So what I'm going to do is put them in my sleeping bag, and I'm just going to kick them down towards the bottom when I get into the sleeping bag. This is just an awesome thing to do. Its primary function is to keep your clothes warm, which is just the best thing. When you wake up and it's cold out and you have to put cold clothes on, nothing worse than that. So having warm clothes that are inside your sleeping bag that you can slip on is just awesome. But it also helps in a couple other ways. It can help dry out damp clothes just because the warmth of your body will help dry them out. So that can be awesome. But it can also insulate your sleeping bag a little bit better. If your sleeping bag is too big at all, it'll have extra air inside of it that you'll have to warm up. And so it'll be harder to keep yourself warm. So having some of your clothes and stuff inside your sleeping bag to kind of fill in the cracks can actually make your sleeping bag a little bit warmer for you and work a little bit better. So there's a lot of benefits just for putting your clothes inside your sleeping bag while you sleep. That'll keep you way warmer when you're in the outdoors. So that's this one. Let's move on to our next way to stay warm in the outdoors. All right, like we mentioned earlier, another super important thing when it comes to the gear you have on is proper layering. And when it comes to layering your gear when you're going in the outdoors, it really can be make or break. Good layering can make it so you're warm and you just have a fun time when you're in the outdoors, and bad layering can make you cold and wet and miserable. So it's really important to focus on. And again, this is another thing that's going to change based on what weather you're camping in and what the conditions are. But I really like to break layering up into 3 things. You have your base layers, which are what's closest to you, your kind of mid layers, which are like the bulk of what you have on, and then your outer layers or your shells, which are usually waterproof or windproof. So let's start from the bottom and go through them. So the first thing is our base layer, which is what's going to be touching your skin, what's going to be closest to you. And this one is super important for me. This is usually like the most comfortable stuff, but it's also usually my pajamas. Usually what I sleep in is my base layer, maybe a little bit of the mid layer, but mostly just my base layer. I think some great options are like a stretchy Under Armour type material for tops and bottoms, or long john material, kind of like this, is great insulator and it's super soft. So really it's anything that'll keep you warm and can be close to you, that's comfortable and won't be itchy or anything, but it doesn't take up a lot of thickness, and it's really important to make sure that it's breathable. Being the layer that's closest to your skin, if you sweat or anything like that, it's important that it wicks moisture away properly so that you don't get wet or cold, but it's also important just to make sure that you can breathe. So that's what a base layer should be. Now for our mid layers, really the stuff that keeps us warm. I really love like wool or polyester jackets, just really thick and soft stuff that still can breathe well and isn't necessarily waterproof, but just will keep you super warm. This is really the layer that will give you insulation to keep you warm. So just find some good warm jackets that can still breathe a little bit, but that you can layer. And I think it's good to either have one or two of these on, because it's important with layering to be able to take layers off. And we'll talk about that after we talk about our outer layer. I also want to give a shout out to maybe the best kind of mid layer, which is the Outdoor Cowboy hoodies. I have the Saddle Up for the Ride hoodie on, which is my favorite. I wear it all the time. But we also have our Outdoor Cowboy hoodies. They're super soft and comfortable, but they're still really breathable. So if you're looking for a good mid layer, definitely go check out the Outdoor Cowboy hoodies. They're super awesome. There'll be a link in the description. And remember that a portion of all sales of Outdoor Cowboy merch gets donated to some awesome outdoor organizations that are doing some great things to protect and preserve our outdoors. So when you're buying merch, you're not just supporting me in this channel, but you're supporting some awesome causes. So definitely go check out the Outdoor Cowboy hoodies. All right, now for our outer layer or our shell. I like to think of this mostly as something that's waterproof or windproof. Really just those elements that are gonna be hitting you, your outer layer should really block those. Your outer layer doesn't have to have a ton of insulation in it, because that's usually what your mid layer comes from. But making sure that water and wind can't get in and get you cold is super important. And when it comes to layers, they can definitely be combined a little bit. If you know that it's not gonna be super cold where you go, but there's a chance it might rain, maybe you just have a hoodie on and then a rain jacket over top that. That'd be great. Maybe there's not a need for a base layer. Or I know a lot of times winter jackets will be waterproof and have a lot of insulation. So maybe you just need a base layer under something like that. So it really depends on what you have, and you can really make anything work. And lastly, just the point of layers is to keep you warm, but also be able to take them off. Because right when you step out of the car, it might be really cold when you haven't been moving, so you put all your layers on, but then you get hiking and things and your body temperature heats up, you get working, and then you're super hot and sweaty. That's not what you want. It's important to be able to take layers off when you're getting warm, or even bring extra layers to put on if you're getting cold, maybe when the sun goes down at nighttime, anything like that. It's important to be able to use your layers to keep your body temperature at a good place. And when I'm going hiking or anything like that when it's cold, I usually like to start with less layers on, because I know that my body's gonna heat up. I might be cold at first, but as I get hiking, I'll warm up. And if I don't warm up enough, then I can put layers on. And that usually keeps me from sweating. Because sweating, if it's really cold out, is one of the worst things, because it gets your body wet, and especially it gets your base layer wet, which is definitely not what you want, and makes it really hard just to stay warm. So figure out what layers you need and how best to use them to keep your body warm when you're in the outdoors. Now let's move on to our last way to stay warm when you're in the outdoors. All right, and now on to our last way to stay warm when you're in the outdoors. We're sitting around our fires, it's kind of dying out, which this one is maybe the bonus one, just because I saved the best for last. It really is just an awesome way, and it's hot chocolate. So we got our hot chocolate powder here, and we've had our pot warming up on our stove, so let's pour some into our cup here. Then we'll take some of our powder and pour her in there. Then we'll give her a good old mix. And just like that, we got a delicious cup of hot cocoa. Cheers. Nothing beats a nice cup of hot chocolate sitting around the fire. So that right there is our last way to stay warm in the outdoors. Would definitely recommend it. Obviously it takes up like almost no space and weight to have hot chocolate just in your bag. And a lot of times I like to mix it with chocolate protein powder just to give me a little more protein, a little more calories when I'm out there. But it's just delicious. It warms you up and makes you happy, which that's all you can ask for when in the outdoors. So definitely get yourself some hot chocolate. And I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned some new ways that you can stay warm when in the outdoors. Or maybe you thought of a couple that you can try next time you're out. Because it definitely works to stack these up. If you use a couple of them, maybe I'll use my warm water bottle, and I'll shove my clothes in my sleeping bag, and I'll make a cup of hot chocolate. And then maybe when I'm out and about, I'll make sure to have 2 pairs of gloves. One that keeps my hands really warm, but the other makes it so I can still do some work and build my shelter and stuff. Whatever it may be, if you stack a couple of these or use some of them, it can make sure that you stay warm when you're in the outdoors, which is super important. Like I said at the beginning, staying warm is staying alive when you're in the outdoors in a lot of situations. So do what you need to be prepared next time you go out, because when you're staying warm, you're having fun, and that's most important. So thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you learned some new things. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can keep up on all new videos. We got new videos every Saturday morning, and we got some really exciting plans in the future that I'm super excited to share with you guys. So thanks so much for the support. Go check out the Outdoor Cowboy merch, and I'll see you guys in the next video. If you liked this video, make sure to check out the Outdoor Cowboy YouTube channel. We've got new videos every week, survival adventures, camping projects, tool restorations, and a whole bunch more. Hit that like button, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.